I'm a former federal prosecutor. I'm a criminal lawyer, and but I just was I was like, this will not stand. I must write about this. So so I wrote this paper. Anyway, so let me bring you into the okay. Let me bring you into the okay. We'll do it this way. Sorry, guys. Okay. So you're actually missing this beautiful picture of Justice Alito. But one of the things so I'm not going to reintroduce Dobbs to you because I know you guys are well aware of this case. But one of the things that struck me the most as one of the most disingenuous things Justice Alito said during, in his massively long opinion was, we do not pretend to know how our political system will respond to today's decision overruling Roe v. Casey. Roe and Casey. Well, now we know. I mean, we knew we knew immediately, actually, anyway. So what Dobbs did was it unleashed an avalanche, basically, of crazy anti-abortion laws, many of which had been waiting in the wings, some of which were 100 years old and that they were happy to revive. Some of which outlawed abortion from the time of conception or at 6 weeks before any regular person would have no idea that they're pregnant. Laws with incredibly draconian consequences for doctors, including in Texas, up to 99 years in prison, losing their license, all that kind of stuff, as well as laws also in Texas, incentivizing people to denounce neighbors or people they knew for helping someone get an abortion, even driving a person to an abortion clinic. So also things that had been really uncontroversial for years, such as exceptions for abortions in cases of rape or incest or people who were too young to consent. Some of those laws did away with those. So one of the most striking things about those laws was the kind of single-minded focus on the protection of fetal life to the exclusion of any other consideration. But what is weird is that life has not actually ever been, throughout our history, kind of an absolute value in our legal tradition. The common law doctrines that are foundational to American law, common law being the law that came over from merry old England, that was developed in the Middle Ages and came over during the 18th century, had never really said that a person's life is absolutely sacred. It allowed for stacks of situations, maybe not stacks, but allowed for a number of situations in which a person had the right to take another person's life, fully justified, to protect themselves or their property. Stand your ground laws, very well known. As you know, a person has the right in many states to shoot dead somebody that they consider to be a threat who's coming into their house. And there is literally nothing wrong with that. So an individual has always been found in our American law to have the right of self-defense, the right to enjoy their castle, that is the place they live, and the right to exclude others from that private space. In addition, and shocking to a lot of people who are not lawyers, and indeed to most people who go to law school and hear it for the first time, like myself, is that we actually do not have any principle in our law that requires to render aid or to rescue another person, even if it would be really easy and the inconvenience would be minimal. One of the hypotheticals that we get as early law students is if a person who walks by a baby who is drowning in a puddle, and all they would need to do is just, push the baby a tiny bit with their foot, they have no legal duty to do that. We have, there's basically no kind of that supreme value of life in United States law. So one of the questions is, why are pregnant women, and I'm using the word women not to exclude non-binary people or trans men, but just simply because women was the kind of legal group that was seen historically. So I will mostly be referring to women. So why aren't they accorded the ordinary common law rights accorded to people in general? Some might say that because it's women are treated as second-class citizens, it's a normal thing to think. But I think the disadvantage is more specific than that. I think these laws impose a burden on the twin facts of having a uterus and being pregnant. So the condition of pregnancy thus becomes a disability imposed by law on a particular stage of a woman's life. And in this way, what these restrictions resemble most is the common law doctrine of coverture. So what was coverture? This is not great because you can't really see, but basically it says what was coverture at common law. There's Sir William Blackstone.
I want to let you know real quick that we see everything perfectly here. Just so you know, the slideshow is big.
Stop.
Yes, you're good.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I'm sorry. I was feeling really bad because I'm sort of like, you can't see, you got all this junk in front, but okay, it's just I guess Sir William Blackstone was one of the I don't know if he was one of the great legal thinkers, but he was one of the great legal explainers of the 18th century who influenced all of our founding fathers. And he had this book, the commentary, well, multi-volume tome called Commentaries on the Laws of England, which explained basically how the common law worked. And coverture, he explained, was that by marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage, or at least is incorporated and consolidated into that of her husband, under whose wing, protection, and cover she performs everything, and is therefore called a femme couverte. Coverture in French means couverture is the word for blanket. Practically speaking, coverture meant that during the existence of a marriage, the woman could not make contracts, dispose of property, or earn income without her husband's consent. I think there's a direct parallel in the legal status of pregnant women who now face a range of disabilities, from not being able to direct the course of their lives to being ineligible to receive treatment for cancer. But instead of their legal existence being covered by their husband, it is now covered by the unborn child they carry in whatever stage of development. The marital coverture thing, the rationale was that this was all for her own good, because women were seen as the weaker sex. They were not capable of dealing with the rough and tumble world of commerce, let alone politics. And the idea was that this was helpful for women. As Sir William explained, coverture draped a protective mantle over the fairer sex so that, quote, even the disabilities which the wife is under are for the most part intended for her protection and benefit. So great a favorite is the female sex of the laws of England. So it's the old, with friends like this, who needs enemies. And so early American marriage laws followed this doctrine, in which a wife's subordinate status in the marital relationship was consistent with her inferior citizenship and inability to vote, as we know, until 1920. So I think if you actually were to replace husband with fetus or unborn child, you get the same, the thought or the feeling is the same. I changed Blackstone's words to read this, and it's basically his exact words, only changing the context. By pregnancy, as opposed to by marriage, the unborn and host woman are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the pregnancy, or at least is incorporated and consolidated into that of the unborn, under whose cover she performs everything, and is therefore called a femme pregnant. So just as marital coverture merged the identity of the woman into that of her husband, leaving him as the only legally cognizable actor, being, the man in that case, so fetal coverture merges the identity of the woman into that of the fetus, with the fetus being the only legally important and recognizable person. So one of the things is that, of course, this idea of fetal coverture seems to be connected to one of the anti-abortion movements great goals, which is the idea of bringing about fetal personhood and making that an amendment in numerous state constitutions and things. Obviously, and I'm mentioning this mostly because you guys are secular AC, and so I wanted to throw in a little religion thing here. Clearly, this is a Christian concept. What's interesting about this is that they are deliberately privileging one religion over another, let alone putting religion into government. And the interesting thing is many other religions don't conceptualize life as beginning at conception. So Judaism, I'm Jewish, so I can say this, but as most things Jewish is all over the map, because that's how we do things. They say you put 2 Jews in a room, you get 3 opinions. So one concept is that full status as a human is only achieved at birth. Other texts, including the Torah, say that the soul enters the fetus at 40 days for males, or 80 days for females. Thanks a lot, guys. But basically, it's like it is not at conception. Islam, from the best I can gather, considers that the beginning of human life is also when the soul enters the fetus, approximately 120 days after conception. And that before that, the embryo or fetus or whatever it is just water. Like it's not even the beginnings of a human. It's pretty interesting. But one thing I kind of wanted to bring up, and which I think is in dialogue with this idea of fetal coverture, is that one thing that this fetal personhood argument has never answered to my satisfaction is, even if you accept the proposition that the fetus is a person, and obviously that is well open to debate, as I've just said, it's a religious concept, it's not shared by atheists or anybody who's not, Christian potentially, is that why should that person, the fetal person, have more rights than the person who was living in the body first? It doesn't make any sense, and it is not the way our common law works. Judith Jarvis Thompson was a moral philosopher who wrote an interesting essay in 1971 called A Defense of Abortion. And she introduced this sort of fantastical hypothetical to explain why she believed that abortion should be allowed, even if you did consider the fetus to be a person. She asked the reader to imagine, let me get to my page on the thing. What if you woke up one day and you're sharing your circulatory system with a famous violinist who is gravely ill, and they need to use your kidneys? Even if unplugging the violinist would kill him, she writes, the fact that for continued life, that violinist needs continued use of your kidneys does not establish that he has the right to be given the continued use of your kidneys. If the reader chooses to allow the violinist to use her kidneys, quote, this is a kindness on your part and not something he can claim from you as his due. She concludes, nobody is morally required to make large sacrifices of health, of all other interests and concerns, of all other duties and commitments for 9 years or even 9 months in order to keep another person alive. So again, there's something very specific about why women and why unborn life seems to have a different value morally, legally than everything else, than our general understanding of how the world should work. In terms of a person's body, it's well established that a man's home is his castle. He can pull up the drawbridge. He can repel invaders with molten lead if he so chooses, or a shotgun. It's also a foundational precept in Western thought that a person's body is his most inviolable property. And as one of the most widely recognized characteristics of property is the right to exclude others. So if this is my water bottle, you don't get to have it. I can keep it all for myself. Courts have consistently, at least since the end of slavery, rejected any legal attempt to make people submit to invasions or forced uses of their bodies. The Supreme Court in 1891, in a case called Union Pacific Railroad Company v. Botsford, wrote, "No right is held more sacred or is more carefully guarded by the common law than the right of every individual to the possession and control of his own body." What's interesting is that there have been cases following that to uphold a person's choice not to donate bone marrow to a dying relative. That was a case called McFall v. Shrimp in Pennsylvania in 1978. Or even to submit to blood tests to establish donor compatibility between siblings. So when it was a pregnant woman and a fetus, when it was an actually alive child, there was no duty. In fact, the person had every right to decline to donate bone marrow, or even to decline to submit to a blood test to see if they could be a compatible donor. And that was completely fine, even though in both of those cases, the relatives in need later died. So the court in, I believe, the blood test case wrote, "The common law has consistently held to a rule which provides that one human being is under no legal compulsion to give aid or to take action to save another human being. To force people to do so," it concluded, "would upend the very essence of our free society." So you really wonder, why is it so different if it's a woman who's pregnant? Anita Bernstein points this out in a really interesting book called The Common Law Inside the Female Body, which she published in 2019. She argues that the common law furnishes a strong right to rid oneself of an unwanted occupant located in one's interior. So the common law is designed, according to her, enshrined a kind of condoned self-regard. This idea that as a human, you have the right to put yourself first. And this principle is well recognized and encouraged and agreed with, as long as it's a man holding a gun trying to keep somebody out of his house. But somehow that becomes suspect when the self is a pregnant woman. As Bernstein says, quote, "The common law has consistently had no trouble recognizing entitlements to repel an intruder with deadly force and to withhold favors or benevolence, but it has been less able to perceive a pregnant individual as a holder of these common law rights." My view is that the reasons why this should be so seem to be that they are relying on crude generalizations about women. Marital coverture back in common law rested on a view of women as delicate, empty-headed, and in need of protection. Some scholars have made the connection between this ethos and the rhetoric of anti-abortion activists, which posit women as morally immature, ready to murder their babies in the name of convenience and selfishness, without realizing that this goes against their inherently maternal natures. So a person's body, like I say, is said to be their most precious possession, precisely because you can't separate it from yourself. Yet in a legal system that treats women the same as men at a formal level, I can be a law professor just like a man can. Maybe I'm not getting paid as much, who knows? Anti-abortion laws, though, effectively cover the body of the pregnant woman whose legal existence becomes subsumed into that of the fetus. And this is the result of laws that only consider the safety and needs of the unborn. You can see it in many cases where it isn't even necessarily a woman seeking an abortion. It could be a woman who wanted her pregnancy, but who's suffering a miscarriage and who is denied life-saving treatment until she is literally at death's door or is in sepsis. And in some cases, as no doubt you've read in the news, some women have died in these situations because even laws that allow exceptions for the life of the mother are so confusing and poorly written that doctors are afraid to do regular life-saving care unless it can be established beyond any doubt that the woman was about to die if they didn't help, which is objectively kind of nuts. The other thing is at least common law coverture, for all that it was belittling to women. Women had so little agency. Men, it was definitely completely a man's world back in the Middle Ages, Renaissance, early colonial period, etc. But at least common law coverture was contractual. It required a woman to become married if a woman was divorced or betrayed. The marriage was invalid in coverture.
Caren, I'm not sure, but and I'm not sure if it's consistent for everybody else, but your yeah, the audio just got a little warbly and weird. So I don't know. Yeah,
Do you
it's
remember
like
where it was? Do you want me to repeat whatever that was?
like a minute ago. I'm not sure. Yeah,
Okay.
it sounds better now though.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just repeat this bit for this slide. If there's anything else, obviously anybody is free to ask me questions, and I can go back over anything. Coverture back in the Middle Ages or back at common law was justified by two main strands of argument, which were both effectively contractual. The first was consent. The woman understood the arrangement and entered coverture was not replaced by trick. The second was reciprocity. The woman gave up her agency, but she was protected. She couldn't ordinarily be sued, and the husband was expected to provide for her and their children, and in addition was obliged to take on all of his wife's debts incurred before marriage. In addition, if the husband abandoned his wife, coverture would end. Finally, the other thing was that coverture did not apply to all women. It only applied to married women who had property. It didn't apply to enslaved women. It didn't apply to older women who were widows. It didn't apply to unmarried women. And like I said, it would end in a court of equity to end your marriage. Very rare, but it would still happen. Fetal coverture, though, doesn't even provide the contractual benefits that marital coverture did. First, there's nothing consensual about the arrangement. An unwanted pregnancy, whether from accident, misfortune, or violence, is not something that a woman embarks on willingly. Every time a woman has sex, she is not consenting to pregnancy. Second, far from sheltering her from certain liabilities, pregnancy opens up a whole new world of health risks and legal peril. As you also no doubt know, women have been charged with assault for taking drugs while pregnant. They've been denied medical care for even serious conditions because it might hurt the baby, and have sometimes been charged with homicide for having a miscarriage or a baby who dies shortly after birth. Equally, the condition that causes a woman to suffer detriment under these new flood of laws is the combination of, like I say, being female or having a uterus and then becoming pregnant. But unlike marital coverture, where the husband could forfeit his seigneurial rights if he abandoned his wife or stopped providing for her, there's no way out of fetal coverture. As Mary Ziegler, another professor, has identified, the anti-abortion movement has established a kind of hierarchy of innocence. And this is particularly insulting because the idea is that women will always be under suspicion because they're the ones who have had sex. And even the most innocent, the rape or incest victims, are not without blemish. There's always this idea that maybe somehow it's their fault. In contrast, Ziegler writes, fetal life is supremely innocent, regardless of the surrounding circumstances, because both because an unborn child lacks agency and therefore responsibility for any decision, and because that child has not yet made any choices, good or bad, for which to help to hold them accountable. So there's nothing that the unborn can do to make them less deserving. In some states, even an embryo that is implanted somewhere where it cannot possibly flourish, like an ectopic pregnancy, or a fetus that is not viable, that does not make them any less deserving. The dominance of the fetus ends only upon their death or their birth. It's attractive extension. In this, whoop, I was, whoa, okay. This then, as far as I can see, is the true legal consequence of Dobbs and conservative state lawmaking. Um, with nothing more than rational basis review and only a Catholic-leaning fundamentalist court as a backstop, state anti-abortion bans, there's very little that can prevent them from becoming more and more extreme, except for the will of the voters, which there is a little ray of sunshine that at least in 7 out of 10 states that had abortion rights on the ballot, protections for abortion did pass in 7 of the states. So there is clearly a disconnect between public opinion in general and what is actually happening in legislatures. But while the argument is always that this is going to impact life, it doesn't necessarily do that because there is a concomitant cost to women's health. And it may increase female mortality by far more than whatever number of babies is saved. The other thing is fetal coverture will just be sprung on women the minute they become pregnant, sometimes without warning. And it will affect all people capable of becoming pregnant, even those who dearly wish to have a baby, since it will limit their medical choices, put them at risk in the case of miscarriage, and force doctors to gamble with their own freedom and livelihood in order to provide needed care. So after 50 years of being able to make advances in public life, women's equality will once again be contingent on circumstances beyond their control. So I suppose what I'm thinking really is that these new laws at their core, they're not really about life as I see it. I really think it's about a deep-seated commitment to putting women back in their place. They impose a temporary legal disability that may have lifelong consequences, but they also seem to capture a desire for a world in which men were men and women had babies. Throughout most of Western history, married women of means, who were the most privileged of their sex, had no legal personhood separate from that of their husbands, who had complete dominion over their bodies, their occupations, and their money. As women's rising political power caused marital coverture to be abandoned, constitutional right to make their own decisions about whether to have sex, whether to continue a pregnancy, or how to direct their lives. Clearly, that era is at an end. And I think without recognizing the detriments of fetal coverture are for all women, we're unlikely to regain that is now past. So I'm happy to take any questions you guys have.
All right. So you heard that, folks. If you have a question, please go ahead and put it in the chat. There for right now, there are a few comments here. Let's see. Farrell brings up that coverture sounds like headship, according to Douglas Wilson, Christian nationalist pastor taking over Moscow, Idaho. I don't know. I've heard about that guy, and Idaho's
headship is if the person doesn't mind typing in real quick what that means, I could maybe comment, but
I think it's like I think it's like the the Baptist church and all these fundamentalist churches. There's like the idea of headship, right? Like first it's the pastor, then it's the husband. You may have seen the umbrella kind of graphic before, right? And then women and then children. But even if a woman has a male child, she may have to submit to her male children at some point because they're the ultimate authority. The male children don't have to do chores. They don't suffer from parentification like the girls do.
Finest.
Exactly.
Yes,
so that was.
I agree with you, person who wrote that.
Yes. That's one comment. Let's see. There's another. Oh, that was okay. Yeah, that's Farrell that said that. And then I saw another one. This is a great point by Diane Post, our legal director. She says, oh, but Christianity says that unborn have already sinned, as we are allegedly born with original sin. So that slide, I think, is maybe your last slide where, where it says babies are supremely innocent.
But let me say to your legal director, they're not born yet. So you may be born with original sin, but I'm not certain that you're conceived with original sin. So you might be free of sin for those 9 months that you're hanging out, kicking it inside your mother's uterus.
Literally kicking it. Yeah. I've been pregnant before. I've experienced it.
Me too. And being a mom has been like the happiest thing of my life, but nobody forced me to do it.
exactly. And
So,
I'm sure you got to choose exactly
yeah.
what the timing was right. You probably didn't want to do it right in the middle of a law school, you know, program or anything like
Yeah.
that. So you
Well,
got to
actually, I
choose.
did, but never mind. But yeah, I mean,
That,
the point is, I've never been in a situation where my health and safety and even future fertility was on the line and I was denied care. I did have a pregnancy that didn't work out, and I was able to get a DNC without even thinking about it. It wasn't an issue. It was just, they were sort of like, we're really sorry this didn't work out. Let us help you.
yeah. And it puts doctors these days in such a terrible place, you know, to face their own, like, you know, I don't know what it's called. It's like disbarment, but you know, for medical
They could lose
doctors.
their licenses, but they could
Exactly.
also go to jail for, I mean, and that's assuming, of course, there's maybe the backstop that a jury would not find them guilty, but it's still pretty scary if you're looking at 99 years, as you would be in Texas.
And you
It's
know,
pretty,
now that I think about it, like what place does the Hippocratic Oath have in this new post-Roe world? Like, I wonder if it is it feasible for that for medical providers to say that, you know, as a professional, you're denying me the ability to do my job as I'm supposed to do it and to fulfill this oath to my patients that I took. Like, does that
yeah.
come into play at all?
I think it does. And I think it's exactly like you say, you're not allowing doctors to make decisions based on their medical knowledge and on best practices. And as a country, we already have a very poor maternal mortality rate, and it is only going to get worse, which is just heartbreaking. And needless to say, it's worse for women with fewer means, women of color, but even if you are a rich person who has a medical emergency, you may well be out of luck anyway.
And God forbid, no pun intended, if you do live in a place like Idaho, where now they're seeing entire hospitals without maternal wards because it's a brain drain on these states. Have you witnessed that?
I am aware of some of that, and there's some concern that even like going as far back as medical school, fewer people are going to want to go into women's health generally. And a lot of these clinics, it's not just pregnancy and abortion, it's all kinds of things. I mean, unfortunately, we have a very complicated internal system which needs a fair bit of surveillance and help. So it's it's really appalling. Like it's hard to believe and kind of get your head around that this is where we are.
Indeed.
And honestly, from a doctor's point of view, I can't. I don't know. I mean, would I really want to go teach a class if I thought if I teach this particular class, they're going to put me in jail and I'll lose my family, my livelihood? I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah, there were a couple of OBGYNs here in the state of Arizona who have always been huge advocates. And shortly after the Dobbs decision came down, one of them, a woman of color too, she posted kind of a rant on social media saying, all of you who are, you know, demanding that OBGYNs just do what's right for women have not had to pay for malpractice insurance, have not gone through, you know, a decade of education, have not built their practice up. So, you know, it's not that I don't, but you can't make that kind of statement just blanket and assume that we're all going to be willing to flush our entire career down the toilet and even potentially serve jail time. You know,
Yeah.
it's just not feasible.
And
This is a, go ahead. I'm sorry, Caren.
no. And I'm just saying, and the one of the other concerns about potential fetal personhood laws, or if it does come in, is that there does seem to be an uptick in criminalizing women who are pregnant and then are not pregnant for whatever reason. And the idea that that is even a thing is kind of incredible, but there is more of it. I think I read that there were more women prosecuted for things related to their pregnancy, whether it was taking drugs during pregnancy or having a miscarriage or having a suspected abortion was about 210 women, which is, you'd think, well, that's not that many, but it's a lot. And it will likely be more, depending on how crazy the attorney generals are. I don't know how bad your one is in Arizona, but I know that Ken Paxton is the worst in Texas.
He certainly is. Thankfully, we have a wonderful Attorney General, Chris Mays.
But
She came out when she was elected in 2022 and basically said, I will not be prosecuting any cases against people who are seeking an abortion or abortion providers. And the direction to the 15 counties here in Arizona is that those district attorneys do the same.
Right.
Just letting them know right off the bat, I'm not going to play these games. And now, thankfully, overwhelmingly, the people of Arizona have voted to enshrine abortion in the Constitution, to codify it. I actually just put an article that I read this morning coming from South Carolina, where they've reintroduced, the legislature there has reintroduced a bill to punish people for getting abortions with the death penalty. So that's making a comeback this legislative session. Yeah.
Of course.
Of course, because of course
it
is.
I can't, it's like, it's almost impossible to really think like it's hard to imagine like what these legislators are thinking. Do they really mean it? Or are they just trying to curry favor with like an extremely hardline, voting block? Or do they mean it, and are they mostly thinking of really poor women who they really don't care if they, if they end up on death row, like, because whatever. It's truly cynical and horrible. I know this is not very helpful to be just like throwing adjectives around, but yeah.
This is what we usually do on Fridays, to be, it has the nickname of Rage Friday because oftentimes we're talking about these kinds of topics, and there's nothing, it's hard to stay positive. Though, it is. This is a great one coming from,
the voters have, moved to enshrine abortion rights. So it would not be possible then in Arizona for somebody to come out with that kind of insane type of law.
Yeah. And as Diane Post says, yeah, they fear and hate women. That's, I mean,
well, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know
much.
if every single person who is anti-abortion does. I'm sure that's not, but there's certainly, like I say, I do believe that at bottom there is this, women are getting a little too big for their britches. And that's, it's very discouraging. Because we have made so much progress, but it's not linear. And I guess I'm no longer convinced that, things are generally like, we may have setbacks, but we're always moving in a positive direction. I think that possibly many people's faith that, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice isn't necessarily true. Like, it's unclear. I mean, that doesn't mean we all have to like be depressed and not do anything, but you do sort of wonder. It does seem like dark times. Yeah, it doesn't bend on his own, Ian Hem.
Yeah, exactly. Kate says, and I wonder if anybody's ever tried this. Kate says, I'm thinking if a woman is charged, she should use self-defense as her legal argument.
I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah.
I guess it would have for criminal self-defense, the idea would be that the danger has to be imminent. So that might be difficult to prove. I think it's a very legitimate argument. But the when of it would be a little more difficult. Like if it's a, first trimester medication abortion and nothing really has happened. I don't know, it might be harder to win on that one at court, but I do think that that's effectively, that is the argument. If it was a raft, like coming back to my common law idea, if a person is on a raft and another person is drowning in the water and comes swimming by and tries to get on the raft, the only distinction the law makes between those two people is the guy on the raft who was there first has priority. he doesn't have to fish the other person out of the water, and the person doesn't have the right to get on the raft and push the person who was there in the first place off. There's that kind of like, I was here first. There's this kind of a, primacy idea, but that really just does not work in the pregnant woman situation. It's like, I'm living in this body right now. If somebody comes along, they're there second. It was
Mhm.
it was mine first.
It's unbelievable that this is where we are in 2024. Here's another question from Phil. He says, what legal arguments could anti-contraception proponents use to attempt to make contraception illegal?
I think some types of contraceptives, contraceptive methods that are so-called abortifacients. I'm not a medical person, but as I understand it, so like things like, actually, let's forget any examples because I'm not qualified medically. But I think that there are certain types of contraception which prevent an egg from implanting, could potentially be seen as violating these anti-abortion laws, because if the egg is fertilized and the method prevents it from implanting, that could be seen as ruin, murder, which is objectively nuts. But I do think that those types of contraception, I don't know if that's the coil or whatever, I'm not sure. I know that there's some things that do that. I think if you're on the pill and the egg doesn't appear so far, that should be okay. Condoms also, if the sperm never made it, that's also presumably okay. But this idea that like the fertilized egg is life, when it's really just the potential of a potential, is objectively insane in my medical opinion.
Yeah. Somebody brought up Texas here in the chat, and I'm thinking about I've been reading a couple of articles over the last couple of weeks about how now they're no longer collecting data on maternal deaths in Texas.
Oh, wow.
Because because it's bad press for their draconian abortion bans in the state of Texas. And so now I read a couple of things where they've just made the decision to basically come after people who are reporting the deaths in an honest way and kind of trying to squash
On
that
what
information.
basis can they come after them? Like criminally?
I need to go back and see if I can find the article, and maybe Lindsay's looking now, but yeah, I was just kind of shocked. And there's all this outrage coming from medical providers in Texas and, women's groups in Texas. ACLU, I believe, has gotten involved with it. It's just, yeah, I mean, because it's not flattering for the party that's in control in the state of
No,
Texas.
of course not. But
yeah.
well, I mean, I guess we're in kind of a precarious position in terms of in terms of information about health nationwide in any event, I think. So in terms of data collection and public health issues, I think we're going towards a period of probably a fair bit of a low information period, to put it charitably. So
yeah, I spent the last week, I had a family emergency and I was in Illinois last week, and my tiny town in the Midwest has about 7,700 people, and it is, there's farms everywhere, rolling hills and cornfields and altars to Trump, just out in the middle of nowhere.
yeah.
It is unlike anything I've ever seen. I had a conversation with a family member that was, it used to be a really intelligent, like somebody I looked up to in my family, and the dumbest things came out of their mouth, like just the dumbest about, like we're in the era of mis and disinformation, and it is going to be, I agree with you about the whole arc of, justice and all that, because I've always been very much an idealist, but this is going to take decades, a generation to undo. And in one of our meetings that we had, we talked about just how, it's a people's lack of experience. You know, most of the soldiers that fought fascism in World War II are dead, right?
That's true.
You know, most of the people who suffered from polio or whooping cough or whatever are, you know, they don't remember what it was like to
Yeah.
not live in a world with vaccinations. And so sadly, it just kind of
Crazy.
it seems like we're going to have to let people just discover what tariffs are. And I'm not like, I know what tariffs are can do. So I
Right.
don't feel satisfaction knowing that these people are about to find out,
I know.
because the rest of us are going to suffer too.
I know. It's really incredibly depressing that we're going to have to relearn like the last 70 years of history all over again because we're stupid. But isn't it those who do not learn from their mistakes are doomed to repeat them?
Yeah, and it's happening and it's going to happen. And now, you know, it's hard not to be cynical when at least 14 of these cabinet picks are literal billionaires. The fact that Elon Musk seems to have been elected president is worrisome.
That is really kind of crazy. Like you wouldn't have thought. It is definitely Banana Republic level stuff where you wouldn't think that you could just become an unelected random guy who's going to go around, you know, like changing the federal government. Thanks, Mitch McConnell, says somebody. Yes, I'm agreeing with you. You know, it's hard to decide who I dislike the most because there's so many. It's such a huge, such a rich pool. They have a very deep bench of truly detestable people.
Yeah, like
Other than gallows humor, I really don't know how to deal.
I think we're all kind of in that spot, and we're all just kind of like maybe ensconcing ourselves in December and the comfort of maybe seeing family that we actually like and eating food that we really enjoy. And then we just know that it's a matter of time before we start seeing the further dismantling of our democracy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess.
Oh, that's great. Alex says, I love Maya Angelou's history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. That's good. That's a great
Yep,
quote.
it does.
And as far as that Texas article, we put it, there's a couple of articles in there about it. It's the Texas Maternal Mortality Committee faces backlash for not reviewing deaths from the first 2 years post-Dobbs. So they just made an arbitrary decision to stop reviewing maternal mortality, and that's where it's coming from there.
That's reassuring.
Right? Yeah, no, it's wild. And, you know, here in Arizona, we've seen, you know, number one, like election denier is now going to be the head of elections in Maricopa County, which is like the largest or fourth largest county in America or fifth largest county. That's terrifying. We have a new county superintendent who seems to only want to dismantle our public schools and is known. She got some national attention for giving President Trump an AR-15, and she's going to be running our schools here in Maricopa County.
Oh, she sounds so appropriate.
We had an award-winning, she was a Teacher of the Year 2016, Senator Christine Marsh lost her race to Moms for Liberty school board member in Scottsdale. Like, up is down, black is white, cats and dogs living together. It's anarchy currently. That's where we are.
I don't know. It's funny to me that this is what people want, or a large number of people want this. So I suppose the only tiny relief I have is that it all belongs to them right now. So when things get screwed up, which they will because they always do, you know, like when somebody that you vote for gets in and the first really terrible thing happens and you're just like, no, like Afghanistan, Joe Biden. I was like, no, Uncle Joe, how could you? I don't need to worry because that's all on them now. So it's cold comfort, but you know, it's something.
Yeah. And like, as somebody here says, Trump will always blame anything that goes wrong on someone or something else, and his followers will believe him. And Afghanistan, that decision was made by the Trump administration. And so Biden was following through on what Trump promised, but that's not how anybody's going to remember it, you
No,
know?
because it was on his watch. So I don't know. I mean, I guess another thing we can look forward to is when the guys start fighting, because there's no way all those egos are going to be able to fit in one small thing. So at least we can have a bit of Schadenfreude, and then hopefully by 2026, you
Yeah.
know, we can get Congress back, which would
Very,
be,
very.
um, yes, shiny object. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
the media,
so
that's a
Diana
great
says it's
quote.
not funny. You're right, it's not funny.
Not
It's just,
funny.
it's like, I don't know what else to do except make stupid jokes. I mean, not really,
Mhm.
that's not entirely true, but I mean, like when I'm talking to myself, I mostly I just try to become as cynical as possible. And, you know, just so that kind of like try to grow that shiny carapace to kind of, you know, protect. Because again,
Mhm.
you can't, there's lots of things we can do. There's lots of things that are currently out of our control. And so I think it's probably from a mental health point of view, it's, oh, good. Yeah, me too. It's, you know, we got to take care of ourselves to some extent and those we love and try to, you know, just tiny, you know, make the little tiny bits of difference that you can in your daily life with the people that you know, even those that don't agree
Mhm.
with you.
Agreed. Yeah. Now more than ever, we need to find our people, find fellowship with those people, find purpose, you know, find ways to you know, actually do an activism, right, in our communities.
Well, like you guys are doing. I mean, I think it's
Mhm.
great that you've got this, you know, I was looking at your website and the different talks you've had and stuff, and it seems, it's terrific. At least, you know, you're doing something positive. People, you know, hopefully can learn something a bit, you know, donate to abortion
Mhm.
funds.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it just, so coming back to my topic for a sec, it's like, I cannot believe that we're back to such an archaic type of situation where women end up with no power. And somebody else, even something that doesn't even have a face yet, gets to have more power than the
Mhm.
woman.
And it's really frustrating too when I see so many women who are eager to hold up the patriarchy and to bend the
Yeah,
knee to
that's
fascism.
weird. That whole, you should maybe do a thing on trad wives at some point, because that's an interesting concept.
Oh, we have,
Oh,
trust and
you have, yeah.
believe. Yeah, we've had a few folks come on, some of them who themselves were you know, caught up in that kind of trad wife marriage, you know, and a
Right.
fundamentalist upbringing. So yeah, it's a common topic here, unfortunately. And we've only got about 3 minutes left. So I like to try to end. As I said, we call this Rage Friday. So I try
Yes.
to end with a little bit of hope. So, Professor Caren Morrison, in these dark times, what does give you hope?
Um, ah, okay. Shit, I'm sorry. Not okay. I don't know that I have a whole lot of hope. It's more just there are things that are still good, which without turning our back on what's going on in the world, we can still enjoy. And eventually things develop and change. Hopefully they're not going to change for the much worse. But I mean, look, hope, I suppose, is like if you really think about what people genuinely want as reflected in how they vote, um, in terms of abortion referendums and things like that, people are not as hateful and anti-feminine or feminist and anti-abortion as the politicians are. And at some point, I hope that that will catch up with them.
I agree. We saw a major disconnect here. You know, um, the abortion protection ballot initiative was voted in overwhelmingly, but
Mhm.
then many of those same people either didn't vote in their legislative races
Right.
or their county races. So that is now what a lot of us who work in these kinds of, advocacy spaces are trying to figure
Right.
out. Like, now it is a battle for information and facts and truth. And
Yeah.
so as much as all of us can, that is what we're going to have to do is make sure that we ground everything in facts. If we're met with misinformation, state the fact, explain why the misinformation is wrong, and then state the fact again. And that's the best we all can do, right?
Yeah. No,
And
exactly.
and beyond that, Fridays make me have hope, because at least we've got this many people and people like you,
Yeah.
Caren, who do this important work. So with that, I'm going to say, I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much, Caren Morrison, for joining us today. I appreciate
Thank
you and
you
the
for
work that you
inviting me. It
do.
was a pleasure.
Good.
I
I'm
hope it
glad that you
made a little
enjoyed.
bit of sense what I was saying.
Absolutely, it did. Oh my. Sorry, I lost my screen for a second. I thought I accidentally ended the meeting. Okay, everybody. With
Okay.
that, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you in January. Bye,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.